Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us today or for listening to this recorded session. We are really excited to kick off the cohesive series around the Maximo Application Suite journey. I think we're really excited to talk to our customers about what is coming next in Maximo. The Maximo Application Suite is transforming our business, and Cohesive has been really involved in these discussions for the last 3 years since we've gotten ready to move our customers from Maximo to the Maximo Application Suite and all the value that that delivers. So who is Cohesive? We are 9 companies that have come together under Bentley Systems, delivering a really deep industry knowledge as well as product knowledge. We were 9 companies before that implemented Maximo all over the globe. I'm really, I love saying that we have a customer now on every continent in the world, even Antarctica. And we really value that customer first approach. We are, from the end-to-end life cycle of your asset. So transformation is what comes to mind, especially as we're talking about the Maximo Application Suite. And where does that digital transformation come in for our clients as well? So we're going to be talking about hosting today. The Maximo Application Suite is new, but hosting isn't. This is something that we've been talking about for many, many years. As Maximo customers, we realize that a lot of you have it on-prem, but a lot of you have been hosting Maximo for many, many years. So this isn't going to be new, but it's how Cohesive delivers Maximo Application Suite in the cloud with managed service. And I have 2 amazing experts with me today. Jeff Yazinski, I've had the pleasure of working with Jeff for many, many years. He is the director of the Cohesive Practice Leadership Group, specializing in the Maximo Application Suite. So Jeff and I started talking about this many years ago. I remember calling Jeff and saying, okay, this is coming. Red Hat, OpenShift, Linux, what does this mean for our clients? And Jeff did exactly what he always does. He nerded out and went and got super certified in all of this stuff. So I'm thrilled to have him on the phone today, taking us through what this journey looks like with hosting and the managed service. We also have Stas Shvetsov. And yes, I have been practicing that. Between Yazinski and Shvetsov, I'm really being challenged here. But also has been on this journey with us, cloud infrastructure engineer and previous hosting team manager at Vitasi. So we were thrilled last year when Vitasi became part of the Cohesive family and really just, again, like I said, worldwide, broadens our skills, deepens that knowledge base that we have in this space. So I'm going to hand it over to the experts now. I will say, please ask your questions in the question box and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. We're also going to share these slides within 24 hours of the presentation. So thank you again for joining us, and over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, great. All right, I'm gonna just kind of get the slides going here. I'll turn off my camera. And yeah, thanks for that introduction, Candy. Really appreciate it. So yeah, so we've got a few slides to go through here. Ultimately, we wanted to make this an information session for the audience. So Stas and myself will be walking through some slides. It's going to take probably 35 to 40 minutes here. We'll open it up for a QA at the end. But ultimately, what we wanted to do here today is just go through some information about MAS, right? So I think this is going to be a really, well, I hope it's going to be a good information session here, whether you're looking at a hosted solution or if you're going to stick with on-premise, right? So an on-premise deployment, hopefully this is going to be good information for you as a whole, as we talk through a lot of the different components, implications, the considerations as part of just a Maximo Application Suite deployment. I think with the new version, a lot of things have changed, right? I think there's a lot of different considerations. The technical architecture has completely changed, right? So I think these are a lot of things that, we're having conversations with customers with, right? We're really trying to, help facilitate, the switch to this new infrastructure and what this looks like, the upgrade path. Like Candy had mentioned, we've been doing hosting for quite some time, right? We've got a large number of Maximo 761 customers. We've got mass customers right now on our hosted solution. But we're trying to ease the transition and help everybody and help our customers understand what this looks like, right? So
Jeff, I'm so sorry to break in. This is Kat. We're having some people saying that they cannot hear the broadcast. If folks could just
okay,
chime into the chat to make sure that we are hearing. We had people that said that they can hear us, but we have some others that don't. I just want to make sure that this is an intermittent issue at a
yeah,
particular location.
okay. I'll just pause for a second here and just make sure. But I guess it's some folks are hearing me, right?
Yeah,
I hope.
it looks
Okay.
like people are saying they're fine. So let's go ahead and continue.
Okay.
Very sorry
Yeah,
for
it's unfortunate. I think what we, I if there's some sound issues for a few folks, we'll make sure that this is recorded, of course, and everyone will get links and all that good stuff. So yeah, so carrying on here, I think one of the, why are we here, right? Ultimately, why are we talking about some of this new stuff? I think the big thing here is, well, end of support for 761 is coming soon, right? We've got just over 2 years away to move to the new MES or the new platform, look at what the upgrade looks like. There's a whole bunch of considerations that we need to look at, right? There's a lot of things here, right? So let's, we'll kind of dive into each one of these as part of the session. Of course, to talk about all of these, it's significantly, it's a significant session, right? We need to, if you need, we'll talk about next steps at the end of this session. But if you guys need to, talk about any of these in more detail, certainly feel free. We've got our contact information on the last slide here. So from an architecture and technology perspective, there's a switch over here, right? Historically, you deploy a Windows server, you deploy a Red Hat Enterprise server, or you deploy a server that's supported with WebSphere, and you deploy Maximo on that, right? You install the SMP folder, all that good stuff. Things are different now, right? I think the big thing is this is all containerized, the technology is different. This is all going to be deployed within OpenShift. So the product it's Red Hat. We're going to talk a little bit more about OpenShift as part of this session, what it looks like. But the OpenShift container platform has changed the way that we do deploy this, right? So there's quite a few efficiencies, of course, but of course there is a change in learning, in understanding what this looks like, and there's a lot of different implications just as part of the architecture and technology. I think one of the big things that we've been looking at Cohesive is how do we deploy this in a standard, consistent, and repeatable fashion. I think this is a key component as part of this. And more specifically as part of our hosted solution, we've kind of figured this out, right? We've got some infrastructure as a code way of deploying this. It's automated. There is some standardization that we've gone through, and Stas is going to talk a little bit more about that here very shortly. The IBM release lifecycle policy, this has changed. So actually, as part of MAS, there's been a couple iterations or versions of this, but the more recent one, with 8.7 and later, or MAS 8.7 and later, there's a little bit more information, and there's more things that we need to be considered or take into consideration as part of this, right? So I actually have a dedicated slide on this because this has a big implication about the sustainability of Maximo, right? Or manage or MAS, making sure that we're under support, right? So this is going to make, we need to make some decisions as part of this when you deploy MAS now. So there is 2 different release cycles or policies. There's the continuous delivery, And then there's the long-term release policy. So we'll talk about that. What does that mean? Of course, this means that, the frequency of upgrading mass and manage is different depending on which release cycle you subscribe to. Okay, so we'll talk more about that. Sustainability. This is all about efficiencies, right? So of course, sustainability is a pretty big word these days. I'm not going to cover too much on this, but processes have changed with mass, and we need to try and be efficient as possible, right? We know that the architecture and technology has changed, the requirements has changed, right? So OpenShift does have different requirements from a CPU, memory, hard drive perspective. Even things as simple as a backup and restore as part of the managed process has changed, right? So there is different implications. So as part of our processes, taking a backup of production and restoring it down to dev or test, or moving databases around, there's additional considerations and process changes that need to do that, need to be involved with that, right? So we need to be efficient here, right? But those processes, they're up to date. We've got some different processes as part of our hosted solution, which allow for this, of course, right? The maintenance and updates is a big one, right? So it's different, right? So you need to be concerned with the operating system, the OpenShift cluster updates. Red Hat OpenShift now does weekly releases, right? So there is weekly releases with OpenShift. Of course, there's a balance, right? A lot of our customers aren't going to subscribe and do weekly releases, so it needs to be a balance. Of course, we've got a standard process in place as part of hosting and our managed services. Of course, we work with our customers to ensure that they're up to date, they're under support, and it works with the business, right? So some customers are much more sensitive around updating and outage windows and all that good stuff. With the introduction of OpenShift, there is some significant more efficiencies that can be done because it is a distributed system. So OpenShift works over multiple servers. So we've got some efficiencies there when we do update the OpenShift cluster. Okay. But there's databases, there's prerequisites. So there's a number of prerequisites that get put into the OpenShift cluster itself to ensure that we run mass and manage and any of the other applications within the suite. So these are all considerations, right? Security and monitoring. This is also another big thing. It's just different, right? So there's containers, there's pods. Of course, even something as simple as deploying an SSL certificate, right? The process has changed, right? We figured this out. We've got a process for this. The URLs are different, all of that sort of thing. So from a security perspective, there's many different considerations as part of this, right? Availability, of course, is a big thing. From a monitoring perspective, Stas will talk a little bit about this as well, in addition to some of these other topics. But ensuring production is up and running, it's available. There's a combination of some things and efficiencies that OpenShift provides, but of course, you need to monitor the system to ensure it's running sufficiently. And then the last topic, this is a big one, right? The whole process revolving upgrading to mass, right? The vast majority of customers right now are on 761 or even an older version. I've talked to a few customers on 760. Of course, there is a process to this, right? So I think the key thing here is this is not a re-implementation, okay? Of course, the architecture has changed. You do have to deploy the OpenShift clusters, you deploy mass, manage, all that good stuff, but it still follows the same style of upgrade process that we're used to, we're familiar with. Update DB still exists. There's still refactoring that needs to happen. You still want to look at your custom classes, automation scripts need to be, looked at, tested, validated, all that good stuff. So that hasn't changed, right? So, the tried and true, the upgrade process that we've been doing for many, many years, while the infrastructure and architecture has changed, we still go through that same process to validate, go through user accepted testing, things like that, right? Integrations is still another big topic for upgrading, right? Our hosted solution does support integrations, the VPN client back to the on-premise, through some sort of like an IPsec VPN. But this is all supported. But of course, validation, ensuring that connectivity exists, all that good stuff is certainly required as part of an upgrade process. Okay. The last topic is a big topic, of course. So upgrading to MAS. This is another session that we do. We'll talk about this on the last slide. Okay. Real quick, we wanted to do just a real brief introduction to MAS itself. I think this has been hammered out there. There's a lot of presentations that we've gone through. What exactly is MAS? I'll briefly talk about this, but ultimately it's a single platform that provides access to all the application and technical components. So when you as a customer, or whoever buys your app points and gets entitlements to MAS, what happens is you get entitlements to Red Hat products as well. Of course, the entitlements are only for MAS manage and certain applications that are related to the program itself, but you get access to all of those based on the app points entitlements. So when you get your IBM entitlements for MAS, you can link those to your Red Hat account, or you have to create a Red Hat account, and then ultimately you get access to the OpenShift and all the prerequisites. Okay? We know this is all deployed on our OpenShift container platform. This is completely different. It's deployed differently. Of course, what happens is the OpenShift container platform goes out to the registry itself, or the container registry, or the catalog, and it goes ahead and grabs the containers themselves. Okay, and then of course there's some things that happen within OpenShift, the build process. It does a lot of different things. It bakes in configurations into the EAR file itself. There's still an EAR file. It just, we don't necessarily have to build it similar to how we used to do it in 7.6.1, right? So you don't have to manually build EAR files. So there's a lot of efficiencies there with moving to MAS itself. And of course, this is all containerized, right? So OpenShift Container Platform, another background slide here. So this is the platform for developing and running containerized applications, of course. So it has its own operating system. So this operating system it came from Red Hat. It really, it's been around for a while, of course. It was built based on container Linux. So what Red Hat took was they took some of the features from container Linux itself. Of course, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a hugely popular enterprise operating system itself. They've combined some features and functionality from each of those operating systems, and they've built a dedicated operating system specific to deploying OpenShift itself. Okay. It includes, so OpenShift itself, or the platform, includes everything you need to deploy containerized applications, okay? It is a framework, or it's a platform, so it includes a lot of different elements. It's not just something as simple as deploying, WebSphere as an example. It has got a lot of different functionality itself, okay? So a lot of the things, like for example, your load balancer. So it does have an internal load balancer. So things are significantly more simple once your OpenShift container platform is set up. When you start looking at things like horizontal scaling, expanding the usage of Maximo, or manage, I should say. So if you need to have a horizontal cluster, when it comes to, like for example, if you've expanded your usage of manage, and you need another user interface, as an example. So there's another JVM or a container or pod that you need. You don't have to go ahead and start updating the networking components. You don't have to look at your load balancer, right? So once OpenShift Container Platform has been set up, you've got a load balancer at the front end of it to enter into the OpenShift, or the OpenShift itself. All of that is automated. Okay, so there's a lot of automation that happens. It's simplified things from an administrative perspective. Of course, this is different, right? So It's different than running WebSphere, so you do need to know how this functions, this works, all that good stuff, okay? But OCP or OpenShift does contain a lot of different things. And of course, it is built upon, or I guess it's based, or it has Kubernetes as part of it, okay? So it basically, what OpenShift does is it takes the Kubernetes platform, which is an open source container engine for automation of deployment, scaling, management of containerized applications, and it's built a lot of different pieces of functionality around that. Okay, so it's expanded it, and it allows an administrator to do a lot more in a more automated way. Okay, one analogy actually I saw is with a car, Kubernetes is the engine and OpenShift is the vehicle itself, right? So the vehicle itself provides a lot more functionality, where Kubernetes and the engine is the component which is going to move the vehicle itself. Okay, so this is a good analogy. Of course, the vehicle has a lot of different functions, and that's similar to OpenShift itself. Okay, let's move on. Another little bit of information session, because this is very, this is a, when it comes to hosted managed services, this is a very important piece of information, right? So ensuring that your product, or I guess the deployment of mass and manage, is up to date, right? There's some changes over the past couple of years, but this is the most recent, or I guess this is some information about the most recent lifecycle policy. But I had mentioned before, there's two release streams, right? So there's the continuous delivery, and then there's the long-term support stream. Okay, so they're quite a bit different, and you do need to choose which stream you want to pick. Okay, so you need to choose which one. So, and there's pros and cons, and there's implications, and there's things that you need to be concerned about with either stream itself. Okay, so the continuous delivery stream is a stream that is more frequently released. Okay, so what IBM has said, and of course this is all subject to change. Cohesive as a whole does not own, the release, anything about the product itself, but obviously we're knowledgeable on it. But these are all subject to IBM. They do tend, or they have changed this in the past. But what IBM has said is the continuous delivery stream or release happens 2 or 3 times a year. So as we go along, every half a year, we're seeing a new continuous delivery or release itself. And this is going to contain all the new features and capability and functionality. So one of the big things with the continuous delivery stream is net new functionality. Okay, so, and of course, if you subscribe, or if you're on the continuous delivery stream and you want that new functionality, of course, this is going to require more testing, validation. So if you of course want this new functionality, you're going to need to go through the process of validating every time you do upgrades to the new version. Okay, there is also the long-term support stream. Okay, so this one is this one's more for customers that do not want to do more frequent updates. Okay, from a functional perspective. Okay, so I guess there's a little bit less impact on your system itself. Okay, so perhaps every upgrade that you do, the workflow may not need to be refactored, or screens may not change, right? So that long-term support stream, there's no functional changes. So it's probably, it's a little bit less of an impact, of course. Okay, both streams, of course, offer ongoing security updates and defect fixes. Okay, so that's the key thing. But they also have a different support policy associated to them. So continuous delivery allows support for the 2 most current releases, and long-term support is available for 3 years. Okay. And from a hosting and managed services perspective, of course, we work very closely with our customers, and we determine, our default is the LTS, because that is I guess there's less impact, and it is supported for 3 years. We do apply the minor versions to this to ensure that the ongoing security update and defect fixes are applied to that. But we work with our customers, right? Because there is an outage required for this. If a customer for a particular reason, needs some of the, the new features and capability, that's a conversation that we have, of course, with them. Okay. And from a release schedule perspective, Mass 810 was out in March. I believe there's been 2 or 3 minor version updates to that since then. And that includes security releases or security updates and defect fixes. That one was designated as an LTS, or a long-term stream or long-term support release. We're going to continue to see, 2 or 3 releases every year, of course. Mass 811 is out sometime in September of this year, of course. So this is going to be more than likely designated as a continuous delivery release. And then what we're going to most likely see is Q1 of 2024. We're going to see another release. And of course, we can't predict, that far in advance, but it's going to be, it's certainly a continuous delivery release, but it's possible that it also gets stamped as a long-term support release. But time will tell, of course, from IBM. Okay, yeah, so let's dive into a little bit about what our cloud, or the cohesive cloud system, is. I think one of the big things, we can do everything for you, right? So single source, end-to-end turnkey Maximo hosting and implementation. We work very closely. We've got a large number of groups. We're worldwide, like Candy had mentioned. We've got customers in every continent. We work very closely with all of our different areas within Cohesive itself. So we've got cohesive hosting, we've got our service delivery, which are going to be doing, your standard implementation services, within Manage itself, right? So they'd be configurations, workflow, all that good stuff. And of course, we work with our support team as well, okay? We keep the lights on production and your non-production environments, right? So we've got round-the-clock support coverage to ensure that, your systems are up and running, they're running sufficiently, and your users have full access to that, okay? We are a flexible SaaS model, okay? So we try to tailor this to our customers' needs. So we do offer 2 different types of deployment models, okay? So we do have a public shared offering, and then we also have a private or isolated offering. A lot of our conversations here today will focus on some of the private or isolated option, but we also offer a public option, which is a little bit lower cost, of course, but there is pros and cons of each one, and of course limitations of the public offering itself. Okay, so it's more of a standard, closer to out of the box model, right? We try to match your usage, or I guess our deployment, which ultimately has an impact on cost, with your usage. Okay, so we generally look at your users, the concurrent users. What do you have for integrations? Is there customizations? Do you have third-party deployments? Right, we do support a lot of that. Of course, Stas will talk a little bit about that as well. But we try to tailor this to your specific needs. Okay, in our public offering itself, or the shared one, we do have limited regional data center that are offered, but on our private or isolated cloud offering, we open the doors and we allow for significantly more regional data centers. So we try to really ensure that we satisfy some of your data center requirements. Okay. The dedicated isolated, or I guess we use a dedicated isolated and never co-located with other user data or access. So this is more for the private or isolated option. Okay, we don't share databases or application server clusters. There's no OpenShift cluster sharing as part of our private offering. Okay, Cohesive as a whole, I think this is we've been doing Maximo for a long time. Obviously, we're a platinum partner itself. We work very closely with IBM for best practice architecture, design, implementation, and we leverage our relationship with IBM, right? So on all levels. So from a product development support and executive level, we understand Maximo, we understand Mass and Manage, and all the different applications that are within Mass itself. Okay, So we ensure that, the experience, and that's what our focus is on, the experience of Mass itself is relatively seamless. And we've got collective years of in Maximo implementation and hosting. I had mentioned before, hosting's not new to us. We've been doing this for quite some time. We've got a lot of customers currently on, all versions of Maximo, right? So this is not something new to us. And then the last point here, the new life cycle does introduce some complexities, right? So, the continuous delivery versus the long-term support, of course, making sure that you're under support on either of those, making sure that you do have the most up-to-date security and bug fixes. Let us, we can help you navigate that, right? Whether you're looking at a cloud offering itself, or if you're still, looking at your on-premise deployment, we can help guide that and help you out with that. So we do offer, I mentioned this before, our maintenance activities. And then as part of our offering as well, we offer yearly Mass upgrades. And we work very closely with all of our teams to ensure that this is going to work well with our customers. Okay. So a little bit more details around what our hosting and managed service is offering. I think these are pretty standard, right? I think a lot of you in discussions, even working with, our hosted groups and our customers for many, many years, this is what you're looking for, right? So we've tried to tailor the experience, to work with also our delivery teams to ensure that, we can successfully deploy Mass, we can configure it, we can integrate it to third-party systems, we can deploy different things in Mass and manage, whatever your business requirements are. We've kind of built an offering to be flexible, scalable, and then, have everything that you need. Okay? So our hosted offering, provision, installation, maintenance, of course, all that infrastructure, right? I had mentioned before, this is different, right? So there's a lot of different things or considerations as part of a Maximo or a Mass and Manage deployment itself, right? So, even something as simple, how many OpenShift clusters do you need? What is the best strategy for migrating configurations, right? Some of that has changed, right? Do you put multiple non-production environments in a non-production OpenShift cluster? How do you handle storage when it comes to OpenShift itself? We've gone through that process. We've got a standard deployment model itself that's consistent and repeatable. Of course, we handle all the network, servers, storage, operating systems, middleware, databases, and every single component, okay? Our standard package itself has 3 environments, so dev, test, and production. And all of those, the underlying networking components and all the underlying part of this is all handled by our hosted team itself, okay? We also enable performance metrics, and this goes back to us and the best practices with IBM design practices, right? So we ensure that when we do a deployment, it complies and it's up to date, and we make sure that when we deploy something, it's standardized and it's managed correctly according to IBM and their best practice suggestions. The managed services component, this is the maintenance activities, right? So this is to ensure that we're up to date on support, right? I had mentioned this before. We work very closely with their customers on the maintenance window. This is more specific to the isolated or the private cloud offering that we have, but we work very closely with you guys to ensure that the outage windows are sufficient. The time, all that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered this, right? Like we work with our delivery team, and we understand that as part of a Mass or manage implementation, there's a lot of things that happen, right? So from a configuration perspective, perhaps you're implementing a incident management process, and we need to work very closely, or we do work very closely with the delivery teams who do that to ensure that our maintenance windows don't impact any of those deployments, right? The database architecture administration, this is all done by our hosted team as well. It's taken care of for you. You know, even things like the backup and restores, right? So if you've got a process, or if our implementation team is in a project where they need, you know, production backed up to test or dev or whatever is needed, or, you know, as part of a project or as part of, you know, using the migration manager, or if we're going through a migration from dev to test, you know, perhaps there needs to be a static, or I guess a one-off backup prior to it's done, or prior to the deployment being done. You know, that's something that we provide as well, of course, in addition to all of the standardized backup and restore and backup procedures that we have in place. Okay. And lastly, the security, right? So network management security, this is very important, right? So, you know, the firewalls, the patch management, upgrades, and responding to emergencies. We go through, you know, we've got a process, we've got things set up to ensure that this is all taken care of for you. Oops. Okay. Just you know, I guess a real high level overview. I'm not going to go through a lot of these. Stas is going to talk on a few of these. If you want, we can certainly dive in, you know, contact us. We can dive into a lot of this, but, you know, we've gone through the process and taking the years of experience of not only hosting, but Maximo, and then our experience with Mass and Manage and all the different applications. We've gone through and we've kind of standardized, and we've set some processes involving all the different components that are required for a cloud hosted solution. Okay. And once again, you know, we work, you know, we work very closely with all of our different teams, right? So we can do all the different activities from hosting to implementation to support. Okay. I'll hand it over to Stas to talk a few minutes around our approach, and then he'll pass the baton back to me, and then we'll open it up for QA.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the more technical elements that we're actively working on at the moment. And yeah, like Jeff said, talk a bit about our approach to hosting. So the points in these next few slides, they're going to be focused on the cohesive cloud hosting solution, specifically the private cloud solution that Jeff has mentioned. Obviously, we're expecting some significant growth for the cohesive cloud over these next couple of years. So we're placing some heavy emphasis here on automation, scalability, and repeatability. Tools and procedures that can help us to expand at scale, you know, with ease, essentially, so without too much hands-on effort. So one of these components is automation and infrastructure as code. So infrastructure as code is managing and provisioning infrastructure through code instead of through manual actions. So essentially, instead of through the UI, for example. We're going to be using Terraform here as our infrastructure as code tool of choice. We already have a library of Terraform scripts built out for deploying some of the core components in the cloud, and this works very well. The reason we've selected Terraform as opposed to some of the other tools on the market, like CloudFormation, for example, a couple of reasons. Terraform, first of all, is open source, so it's 100% free. It's cloud agnostic, so currently we're fully committed to hosting on AWS, Amazon Web Services. But what this does is it future-proofs us if we ever did decide to host with another cloud services provider for whatever reason. It just means that we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel here in terms of completely redesigning all of our IAC scripts, if that ever did occur. The syntax of Terraform is simple yet powerful. So it's written in HCL, which is HashiCorp configuration language. It's similar to JSON, which is probably a more commonly known language. It supports booleans, integers, strings, and many other data types. So it's very flexible in terms of what you can do with it. And we can essentially deploy all of our cloud-based components with this. So everything that Jeff has touched on with regards to networks, the monitoring components in our cloud, all of the security components around the firewalls, around the security groups, around the dedicated subnets and access control lists, all of that good stuff. It can be fully scripted, standardized, and deployed across many hosted clients. As well as that, we can also deploy our OpenShift Maximo Admin Workstation, and that would even include the post-launch setup of all of the components that are required to be on that server, like Python and Ansible, for example. So we'll actually be keeping all of our Terraform files version controlled in a repository as well. We've already made a good start on this. This basically would allow us to have libraries available for different flavors of implementations. Our end goal here is to build out a large library of automation scripts, which would ensure that the longer we do this for, the more resources we have to rely on. So in theory, the more we scale, the easier it gets, right? For the deployment of MAS itself and all of the associated components that come with it, our approach is to utilize Red Hat Ansible. This is another infrastructure as code solution. We're using Ansible to deploy everything that's to do with MAS, essentially. So everything that goes onto OpenShift. So that includes IBM operator catalogs, IBM common services, the IBM certificate manager, MongoDB. MongoDB is actually the AWS cloud native service of MongoDB, which is called DocumentDB, which is very, very good service. It's very cost effective, very scalable. It's very secure as well. Everything is encrypted at rest and in transit here. So kind of ticks all the right boxes really. And obviously we get full support from AWS here as well for using this. And the Suite license service and the user data services as well. And then obviously, of course, Maximo Application Suite on top of all of that. So IBM are actually supporting this as the recommended installation method for all versions of MAS on the continuous delivery stream. So that's everything from MAS 8.7 onwards. They have a collection which they've released on Ansible Galaxy, which is a repository for Ansible scripts, essentially. It's called MAS DevOps. And this collection contains Ansible playbooks and roles for all of the mentioned components here relating to MAS. And IBM are very actively updating and developing this collection as they release new MAS subversions, as new features come out, etc., etc. So this is kind of IBM's #1 supported method now for deploying MAS, which is excellent. It used to be a very, very manual process in the early versions. So this level of automation that IBM is supporting here is a big move forward. Next slide, please, Jeff. So the practices that we're going with here is to utilize cloud native services as much as possible. So cloud native services are essentially dedicated managed services for various tools that run on the cloud, so run on AWS essentially. And we're using cloud native services for all of our aspects of the hosting solution. So that includes our application layer, the database layer, all of the network components that we're going to be deploying are all going to be cloud native as well. So the difference is, we're not going to be deploying, for example, servers and then installing network software onto them. We're going to be using dedicated services for all of this stuff. Security as well, and obviously monitoring too. And all of these are going to be fully deployed and configured via the infrastructure as code practices that I just mentioned in the previous slide. So what that means in theory is a hosting solution design which is resilient, scalable, and repeatable. So basically, it means that we can deploy these scripts anywhere we like, and they will be the same every time. It also ensures minimal manual administration and troubleshooting, going with cloud native services instead of tools that you would have to manually administer, update, look after yourself. And we also get full AWS support from using these cloud native tools. That's important. It means that whenever there's an issue, whenever there's something that's unexpected, we have an expert on hand pretty much immediately to assist us with that. So it kind of means that we can meet all of our SLAs a lot easier that way. We have a detailed architecture diagram already, which captures all of the relationships between these services that I've described here. And we're going to be building out more of these, some low-level stuff as we go And then, yeah, solutions at scale. So, oh, sorry, Jeff, maybe skipped on a little bit there. Yeah, cheers. So solutions at scale is, like I've mentioned, it's just a heavy focus on solutions which are designed to scale and can support, all sectors of the cohesive cloud. So the focus here is on solutions which can aggregate data across multiple accounts and address the challenges of observability as the service grows. So what that means is, obviously, if you have a lot of dedicated AWS accounts for all of your clients, you need some sort of way of observing all of that data and taking action on all of that data and collecting it all in one place. So what some of these topics include: a single pane of glass monitoring view. So for example, we have different elements of monitoring that we're going to be deploying here. So one of them is AWS CloudWatch, which is the Amazon cloud native monitoring solution. And the other one is Prometheus. So Prometheus is actually one that IBM are leaning on for their Maximo monitoring, and they're fully supporting this. They've actually released Ansible roles for deploying a whole monitoring stack within OpenShift, which is specialized for MAS, which is excellent. So we're going to be aggregating all of that data into a single solution, which will give us, oversight across all of our systems. Much the same for things like cost and capacity reporting, and also log aggregation and analytics. I'm just going to touch on here on some of the supported features that customers benefit from when they use the cohesive cloud offering. So we're permitting customizations. So customizations with Java fully permitted and supported by our service. We're permitting integrations, so standard integrations using the MIF. We're also permitting REST services, web and SOAP services, interface tables, and flat-based integrations. Multiple options for integration, so you can either integrate directly with the internet, or we actually offer a site-to-site VPN option, so a secure VPN tunnel between the customer site and the cohesive cloud. And we're obviously, emphasizing a heavy focus on security here, so we're going to be making sure that all of the traffic in transit is minimum TLS 1.2, and all of the data at rest is obviously encrypted with Amazon's KMS service. SAML and LDAP-S authentication, so authentication against an external identity provider is fully supported. This is a very common requirement these days across cloud projects. Very often a customer will have their own implementation of Azure AD or Okta, and they would want to manage all of their users and security groups there, and then just integrate that with Maximo. So we're fully supporting that process. And the user registry sync for actually bringing the users from the Active Directory into MAS is also fully supported here. SMTP integration, so for using a customer's own SMTP server for their emails or an SMTP relay, all of that is supported too. And also third-party mobility products, so products that are alternative to Maximo Mobile, which is obviously the one that's out of the box with MAS. We're supporting the integration of those two. And all of the above can be performed in collaboration with the cohesive services delivery team. So kind of to summarize here, I guess we're giving our customers a lot of flexibility in terms of what they can configure and integrate with MAS, which hopefully makes for a very attractive offering.
Okay, yeah, thanks Daz for that level of detail. So let's talk. This is our final slide here, and then we're going to open it up to a little bit of QA. We've got about 10 minutes left in this session, but I guess, yeah, I just wanted to wrap up with okay, well, so what, right? Like, what are your next steps? What do you guys? What's the next plan, or what do you need? What do we do next, right? So Cohesive offers a variety of different sessions, readiness assessments. Ultimately, we're here to support the journey or the path. If you're on 761, moving to MAS or manage, even if you're looking at, or if you're a net new implementation, of course, there's discussions that we can have, right? So if you're planning for an upgrade, we do dedicated sessions on, just really an upgrade readiness assessment. Okay? This is gonna, go through, and this is going to be a very highly informational session that we focus on this is going to help you understand all the different, in depth, all the different things that are needed for an upgrade, right? What does this look like? We can, build out a project plan for you, which helps, understand the duration, the length of what this looks like, right? So if you need some more assistance on a technical architecture design, what are the different components? What does this look like? Maybe perhaps you've got 5 or 6 Maximo 761 environments. What does that look like in this new mass infrastructure architecture world, right? We can help you guys, we can help guide you in translating that information from, the virtual 761 world to the OpenShift containerized world. Things like how many OpenShift clusters are required. Where does each one fit? Stas touched on a lot of the prerequisite components, right? These are all new to us, right? Cohesive, I guess, not necessarily new to Cohesive, but as a customer who's running 761, all of these terms are also new. Even something as simple as talking about a pod or a container, or what does SLS do, right? So that is a prerequisite piece of software that needs to go into OpenShift from a licensing perspective. We can dive into those. This is all part of a readiness assessment or a presentation. Even talking about your integrations, right? So these are, the vast majority of customers have some level of integration, right? Whether it's your, a massive integration such as an ERP system, a financial system, maybe you've got a data historian that's pulling in meter readings into Maximo and triggering service requests or work orders. It's a conversation that needs to take place because there is some nuances and there's some differences with with the new architecture itself. Okay, customizations is always something that's up for discussion, right? We certainly encourage everybody to peel those customizations out, right? Maximo has had automation script functionality for many years now. So we certainly, our recommendation is to try to peel those out because it makes upgrading certainly simple, but there is scenarios where, just can't convert those to automation scripts, right? So we offer an upgrade readiness assessment. It's it's a series of conversations, to help you prepare to upgrade to the new version, right? If you're interested in more about our cloud offering, we can do deep dives into this as well. If you need more information about this, even something as simple as, hey, I'm looking for a budgetary estimate for in 2024 or 2025 when you're going to be upgrading from 761, we can certainly provide that, or additional just marketing or additional information about what our offering is. Okay? And then lastly, we know that customers and yourself need to move over to AppPoints, right? So there is a conversion process for this. And there is some analysis that needs to be done to ensure that you're optimizing your AppPoints, ensuring that conversion process is somewhat smooth and seamless. And, our organization, Cohesive, can help with that, right? So we do perform analysis on this. We can provide some level of optimization with that, or even just something as simple as understanding what AppPoints are. What does it look like? This is generally as part of our upgrade readiness assessment and presentation that we do, but we can certainly help out with that as well. Okay. On that note, I'm going to move it over to the QA as part of the session. Stas and I are open for questions, comments, anything. I've got an email address on the screen here. Certainly feel free. Shoot us an email if you've got either Stas or myself's contact information. You're more than welcome to email us directly. We've got no issue with that. Obviously, we work with customers on a day-to-day.
Great, Jeff. Thank you. I actually have questions coming in now. I have 3 asking if there are hosting locations in the EU.
Yes. Yeah, we've got a number of them, right? So I don't have the list of them, but obviously we've got the London data center. Well, I guess that's not necessarily EU, but we've got a number of data centers in the EU.
So we've got London, we've got Dublin, we've got Frankfurt, which is
Yeah.
and we've got Paris as well. So those are
Quite a few. So there's options there, and that's why we've made this a flexible offering. And that's one of the questions that we do ask. So if there is an interest in our cohesive cloud offering, of course, we've got a series of questions that we ask, right? So, of course, one of the big questions is, do you want to deploy in our public cloud or dedicated offering itself, right? So that's certainly it deviates and it changes, some of the criteria, of course, and there's pros and cons of each of those offerings. But then we've got a list of questions that we go through, and region is one of them, right? So, what we've found with Maximo in the past as part of our previous hosted solution and our customers moving forward is, there is a very regional aspect to this. Everyone likes to be closer to the data center. While this is something that may change over the years as we go more cloud-based, as as there's less focus on region, but right now, as we see, you guys are very focused and you want to have a so you offer that right now, of course.
Let's see, we've got another question that just came in. Do any customers opt to use their company preferred cloud providers such as Azure? If so, does Cohesive have any experience accommodating this?
100%. Yeah. So this is what Cohesive does, right? This is our delivery services delivery team, right? So, we've got a large number of customers. We've got customers underway where, perhaps they want to deploy, mass manage a different variety of different applications in their own cloud hosted offering. For example, Azure, right? A lot of you already have Azure, right? So you've got Azure systems, you've got servers running in Azure. Of course, a lot of us use Office 365, so all of our data is already in the cloud already. But you click the button and you're over in Azure. But yeah, this is something we've been doing for a large number of years now. We've deployed mass manage in Azure. We've deployed in AWS. Other cloud offerings we've also leveraged as well. So I guess we're not limited. That would be slightly outside of our cohesive cloud offering itself, because this is not cohesive owned infrastructure. But this is something that we certainly do, and we're going to be doing in the future, and this won't stop by any means. This is a big part of what we do, is to simplify deployments no matter what public cloud system you're on.
It is, and one thing that I will add in that is what Jeff is saying. There's also, in moving to the application suite, you're looking at the flexibility of that hybrid cloud model. So you could have some of your applications on Azure or AWS, you could have Maximo, you could have production in one cloud and non-prod and test in another, right? So I think that's where giving us the opportunity to actually meet with you and talk about what's driving your priorities as you look at this upgrade, we can come up with the cloud strategy with you that's going to meet your business requirements. So and I know we did get technical today, so if there are any questions in that, or you want to go deeper there, or if you want to come back to that level 101 class, we're happy to start at the beginning and talk about what the journey looks like with you.
We do have a couple more questions here. If we do run out, we will go ahead and post the answers to these in our email with the link to the slide deck. One is, do we own our own licenses? Can you bring your own licenses?
Yes, we're flexible. Yeah. So all of the above, right? And that's part of the initial discussion we have, right? If you own your own licenses, that's great. Bring them. We can deploy your licenses. We'll use your entitlements. We also offer, there's some other options there that revolve around ESA where we would lease those to.
Go.
Right? So those.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to. Yeah. So it's flexible.
Okay, we've got time for maybe one more question. What is the expected time for Maximo 7612 to mass migration upgrade with few integrations such as REST, WS, FTP, and SOAP?
Yeah, it's I guess it depends, right? Of course, on your cloud hosting strategy, right? From a hosted perspective, if there is very few configurations, if you don't need to validate and confirm that your integrations are working, if there's no customizations, we could rapidly deploy in the cloud, right? So the infrastructure can be stood up in a relatively short fashion, and then we pull your database into the cloud, right? So of course, that's the Maximo 761 database. We pull that into our cloud offering itself. You know, there's some things that need to be decided prior to that, but you know, we're talking weeks. We're not talking, you know, months and months on end. Yeah, so I guess it depends, of course. From a Cohesive cloud perspective, we can pull it in a matter of weeks. On premise, there's a little bit more considerations because it's not necessarily a templated package, because the conversation has to take place, right? So if you're on vSphere, there's some, you know, we need to work with your infrastructure team from a cohesive delivery perspective and pull out the requirements. So happy to have that conversation though, right? That's what we do. We have these conversations all the time.
Okay, that actually takes us 1 minute over the hour. We appreciate your patience on this. This concludes today's webinar. On behalf of Jeff, Stas, and Candy, I want to thank you all who attended today. We trust that you found the presentation of interest and value for your organization. We will make this presentation and a copy of the slide deck available within 24 hours of the broadcast, along with the answers to the questions that were presented today. Thank you very much, and we do look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.